What does good mean to you?
Finding ways to not sit still and not sit static and continually question. I think good is about that constant quest of refinement and improvement.
Welcome to Chasing Good, a Circle Group podcast with the aim to help us better understand the good that's happening in the world today. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome back to Chasing Good. Here today with me, I have the incredible Tom Allen. So Tom, thank you so much for joining us. It is an absolute pleasure to chat to you again. I've had the pleasure of working with you over the past year through the through Impact Boom and the Elevate Plus program that I was fortunate enough to sit on. So thank you very much for joining us, mate.
Michael, it's an absolute pleasure to be here, mate. And it's been just lovely to watch you develop on your journey with Circle Group.
Well, we're not here to talk about me, mate. We're here to talk about you. So let's jump into that, if we could, please.
I love a good evasion of some acknowledgement of the hard work you've been doing.
Well, thank you very much. So can you please tell me a little bit about yourself? So let's kind of dive back a little bit. Early years and into kind of growing into the impact space. How did it start? Where did it come from?
Yeah, where did it come from? I think that's a good question, Michael. I think we all progress on our journey as we get at that experience, right? And for me, personally, I was always really interested in design and design strategy and how that might be used to create goods, services, but very much started in the product space. And so studied industrial design, did a master's in product design over in Barcelona.
Cool.
And spent 10 years living over there. And a big part of that was really, having a big vision to spend a good chunk of time overseas, learning a couple of languages, doing a bit of study, and then sort of finding the way from there. And it was out the back of the Masters that I got a job working for Hewlett-Packard. And so that first job felt quite exciting for me. But what it taught me was that working in a corporation, if we're talking about good, just didn't feel quite right at that time. It felt like, don't get me wrong, the people working there and my colleagues are and were great people. They were applying design strategy to design large format printers. And these printers were getting produced in the thousands and sent around the world. And you've probably seen the models that I'm talking about. So it was a great learning experience, but something inside me said, there's an opportunity here. There is an opportunity here to be using this incredibly rich design process for something beyond printers, for something which we can actually apply to other services or products, things which are actually tackling deep-rooted social, cultural, environmental problems, and problems that we were seeing around us, not just in Barcelona, but worldwide, globally. And so it was after a year there that I took the step to start a design studio, co-founded one with three other co-founders in Barcelona. And we started on that journey of designing those products ourselves. But it was further time that it just kept coming back to asking myself, what is it that feels right? And so from designing sort of high-end products that are going to be sold.
So what kind of products are we talking?
At this stage, it was furniture, lighting, accessories for the European market.
Yeah. Okay.
Typically, to be honest, quite wanky design. Like, products that are, designed by insert name. Right?
Yeah, okay.
In the design fairs around Europe. The intention, however, was that these products would be great quality. They would last for generations. They would get handed down. There'd be, a lot of long-term use. But they were inaccessible. They were highly expensive. They looked great and they performed really well. But it felt like we could take this to the next level. We could ultimately make them more accessible and less wanky. So the next step was really identifying other ways to start to go, well, hang on, what is it that we can actually, generate more good here? And it was at that stage, it was in identifying waste streams and going, well, why are all these waste streams being thrown away and discarded into landfill. Surely there's a better usage for these. Surely we can start designing a more circular system into the way that we design products, the way that the whole product life cycle is understood, and started moving into that area. And we were using textile waste, glass waste, a whole bunch of different products, and started to co-found a bunch of different other companies basically that were operating in what we called sustainable business or sustainable design. And that led to sort of more and more work, which ultimately, when we look back, this was sort of from 2009 onwards. When I look back, it was a lot of ultimately social enterprise or impact-led, purpose-led sort of businesses. And they were the ones that we were just choosing to work with. And that was ultimately the start of applying that design strategy, learning a lot of the business tools on the job just by doing, and feeling, coming back to what is good, feeling, what is that, questioning ourselves, what is that next step we can take to really go to the next level of, like ethically aligned, feels morally right. It feels like we're starting to see some measurable impact in those problems that we're trying to tackle. And so that journey for me was the one that really helped, find the path to what felt right. And now I'm happy to say at Impact Boom, I really do feel like that alignment is there. That working with yourselves, for example, was a pleasure, because you are so committed to delivering high quality services in IT, but using that as a vehicle to then create impact. So it's a pleasure to be working with a whole array of different impact-led businesses that are just intent on doing that. And there's so much value in that collaboration with people who are so passionate and driven.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. And you're right, it is. The whole space is refreshing. Absolutely refreshing. So let's kind of go back again to that period of time where you start to decide that you want to make that shift, where you're working in the commercial world. Was that a bit of self-talk? Was there outside environmental factors that were impacting that? How did that thought process kind of come about? Yeah.
It was a whole array of factors. I think ultimately, within ourselves, we can question what it is that we're doing and whether or not that aligns with where we want to be. So there was that sort of self-questioning. There was also the questions when people were asking what sort of work I was doing, right? That explaining that, I think talking that through with others started to really help to go, hang on a second, something can shift here. It was also just looking at the world at that stage. I mean, the press and the whole thing about climate change and all of these issues that the world is experiencing certainly haven't been created over the last few years, right? There was a lot of articles from around the world looking at all these problems that were coming up quite consistently. And there was also a very interesting political environment within Catalonia or Barcelona, in Spain, around democracy. Ultimately, in Spain and Catalonia at that time was also independence. There was a lot of movements that were really looking at, what it is for society, for people to be living in a space where they are giving back and where they feel ultimately comfortable to be living in a way that is, in their sense, right. So it's been a great journey, and I think again that life experience you get through travel, through living overseas, through learning languages, through putting yourself in uncomfortable places. That's where I've really found that the most growth has really come from me.
Yeah, amazing. Okay. And then so currently Impact Boom, can you tell me where the idea for that came from and what the goal was when you originally kind of came up with the idea?
Yeah, absolutely. So on returning to Australia in 2013, I set up a strategic design consultancy called 7 Positive. And that was very much focused on working with government clients, corporate clients, a whole array of different people to be applying that same design process to understand the problems that they were trying to tackle, to help define or redefine those problems, and then respond in a way that was going to create, high value and good impact, right? And so on doing that, it was probably for 5 or 6 years that I really, we had some great projects, felt really aligned, and at the time was also lecturing at QT and Griffith universities, and I think the teaching side was really great as well, because it sort of helped balance both of those worlds, and really I think when you teach, it really helps you question and sort of stay up to date with what it is you're doing. But I did find that I got to a point where things felt very comfortable. I didn't really feel challenged with any of the new projects that were coming in. And having that sort of hunger for growth, what I'd learned from doing the Masters was that ultimately, whilst the course material might be great, the real value came from the community, the people, the network that was formed out of that experience. And I said to myself, okay, well, what can I do to sort of get to that next level and get out of this place where things feel like I'm just plateauing a bit when it comes to learning? And I thought, I know, I'll do an MBA. That is what I need to do to get to the next level. And I went to a whole bunch of different information evenings, and to be completely honest, felt very unenthused. It felt like, particularly at that time, there was very little consideration of ESG, CSR, shared value, broader impact, and really looking at that in a way that was authentic and deep. It might have been like a 1 unit tacked on to the whole MBA. And it just felt like it wasn't going to do it. And so when I came back and said, okay, well, the real value came from the network, and it came through conversations, it came through getting out there and meeting great people. What is something that I can do to really push the learning? And ultimately took the step that you've taken and said, how about I set myself a 1 year challenge. Every week for a year, I will create a list of people that are really inspirational for me, people that I would love to sit down with for an hour and grab a coffee and just quiz them and just literally learn from them. And so came up with a list, thought, good, okay, started getting in contact, and I was like, hang on a second. If I'm going to be sitting down at a table, why don't I record these conversations and share it with other people who are trying to sort of learn this stuff as well? And ultimately, that's sort of where all of this was born. I mean, Impact Boom, at that stage, if we look at the broader context, the federal government was running a campaign on basically pulling innovation, using innovation to drive forward and create business opportunities, tackle problems. But they had these advertisements, and they were on big billboards, on the bus stands, on buses, and on social media. And I remember them because they were a yellow billboard, and it said, "Australia, we need an ideas boom." And on looking at that, working in that design and business space at the universities and doing the work I was doing, I saw it, and I was like, I've just got to call bullshit on this. We don't need an ideas boom. When we work with the students or the clients, the ideas are abundant. They are consistently coming up with ideas. But the people that we were seeing that were really creating success, that they had defined, were those that were able to actually do something and execute on those ideas in a way that created broader societal value. And so I was like, we don't need an ideas boom. We need an impact boom. Go to GoDaddy, check the domain name, and bullshit. Yeah. The domain's available.
How good is that?
So
what a time. That's awesome.
So I think, that was throughout 2016. We released our first podcast on the 1st of January 2017. And then consistently from there, every week at a minimum, there was one podcast being rolled out. And that was I suppose, the start of Impact Boom.
Yeah.
And not long after, because of the other work we were doing in the design consultancy, we were approached to tender on a project. We did that, and that really became the start of our sort of capacity building educational sort of offerings.
Yeah.
And the accelerators, the incubators, pre-accelerators, programs to help people take their ideas and turn them into impact. And from there, it's just continued to flow, really. And I suppose what differentiates us from those just seeking purely to create a unicorn is that we will only work with those that are purpose-led, impact-led, and really authentic about the way that they are, keen to deliver on that, whilst making money, whilst sustaining that, and finding a way to use that as a vehicle for that deep thing that they are passionate about to tackle. So here we are.
Yeah, amazing. And so I guess you're talking about the people that you work with and the people that you've identified along the way. Where have you found those influences? How has that kind of been brought about, building those communities and finding the influence that you draw yourself towards?
I think it's really just in aligning with people. Number one, you can put a seed out there, you can put an idea out there, and for example, a competitive entry to join a program, and people will sort of unite around that. And then when they come around that, what is that shared goal, right? What is that thing that you are both working towards? It might be the development of their enterprise or project or not-for-profit or whatever else. But in doing so, I think particularly in this sort of capacity building space, there is, and ultimately pretty quickly we started to create this community of like-minded people. And that's really where, when you surround yourself with those really inspiring people that are just so passionate and driven and knowledgeable, that's just where I think the good happens. And
you become one, don't you? That's
that's questionable in my case.
Oh, that's good.
But I think you can draw so much inspiration from that. But not just that. The feedback that we've had consistently over the years is being an entrepreneur is lonely. Being an entrepreneur is hard, and we've been able to go and help people get 6 figures of funding, and in many cases, if they don't have that community of support behind them and they're sitting in an office by themselves, smashing through, consistently hitting those barriers, over time, success, I think, is just so much less achievable without that strong community around you. And ultimately, that's what we are keen to do. We are keen to wrap people with that support, with the right people, the right mentors, the right coaches, experts, inspirational, people working in the same field, so that they can actually get on and get that job done. And it does loan community.
Yeah, amazing. And so I guess, what's the ambition now moving forward? If you look at where you're currently standing and what kind of impact you are making on the world and what you want to continue making on the world, where does that go to?
Look, there's a long way to go. I mean, Impact Boom exists to help grow the Business for Good movement globally. We do believe that business can be used to tackle these problems, and to create these self-sustaining vehicles to do that. And so, what does it look like? I mean, terms like social enterprise are great. We love social enterprise, but we also believe that this Business for Good movement exists in many ways in a bunch of parallel silos right now. So people are using different language around impact-led, purpose-led, profit for purpose, social enterprise, B Corps, and then you enter into the ESG, shared value, etc. space. And what we would like all of these terms to be called in hopefully 5 or 10 years is simply business. It's actually going, well, business is meant to be done ethically and morally. It is meant to be used as a way not just to create financial freedom, let's call it. I don't really like that word, but I think the ability to live and live the life that you'd like to live and live that responsibly, sustain yourself, but do that in a way that aligns with purpose. And so the longer term goal is, how do we just embed this in the business community? And, if we want to look at measurables, to date, we've worked with 241 impact-led businesses, and that'll soon be, in a few weeks, 250 plus. But like I said, there's a long way to go. That's, I suppose, in the capacity building space. When it comes to the media space and, the awareness that we can create to help, like you're doing with this podcast, helping people understand the ways that they can do that. I think we've got a long way to go with reach. We've built an audience on the website from, countries, from, over 200 different countries that come and visit the website, people that tune into the podcast, but there is a lot more to do to really break into that mainstream media and just continue to drive this forward. And finally, I think through events and through other sort of aspirational projects that put us outside of our comfort zone, that's where I think we have an opportunity to continue to build from this community of like-minded, purpose-driven people. And an example of that was the Social Enterprise World Forum, which was hosted in Australia last year, so that's 2022. And that project was the project that Impact Boom led the bid for. And it was a 5-year project from the seed until seeing it happen.
It's a big piece of work.
It very much put me out of my comfort zone, and it was absolutely a journey. But the whole point of doing that was less so about that week of networking and events and bus tours and academic symposium and the main forum, etc. It was more about the journey on the way, and we had some goals to really use it as a driver to create state-based social enterprise networks around Australia, because at the time the only one that existed was the Queensland Social Enterprise Council, who, by the way, are about to have their 10th year anniversary. And there was no national strategy for social enterprise, whereby what we were seeing in best practice from the interviews we were doing was that the countries, for example, like Scotland, that were really using this quite effectively, they had these different things in place. And so we saw a gap there. And the opportunity was, how do we create a deadline? How do we create a shared goal that Australia can unite around and behind and work together on, to use that as a way to influence government, to pull corporates on board, to grow awareness, to build capacity, etc. And finally it played out. And it was just a couple of weeks ago we saw Social Enterprise Australia alongside Social Traders and all those state-based networks which have now formed head to Canberra and speak with those federal politicians. And look, I would like to think that a lot has been done to really start to move towards that. Again, there's a lot of work to be done, but it has really taken a very committed and driven group of leaders in that space to unite together to create that change. And by all means, I think the intention is just to grow that further and to not stop really on that project, because the work that we're doing needs to be done yesterday, right? Like, we look at the IPCC climate reports and everything else. This is not something we have time to wait around, sit on our hands and hope that things are going to get better. So, we need to see action over talk, not just in this space, but I think in business in general. Those are the people that hopefully you are drawn to, those that are actually doing rather than talking.
No, absolutely. And it's the achievement of what you were able to, you and the incredible people, the whole, as you say, the community who were involved, to be able to bring that together and then leverage that to take it to this next level is so exciting.
Absolutely. And full respect to all the partners that came on board, to the co-host that was White Box Enterprises, to all the funders, and the people that actually came along. Like that was
it was a cracking event. It was a wonderful event.
It only happened because of that group coming together and rallying behind.
And so tell me about, I guess, the journey personally for yourself. It's bloody hard to, you use the wording isolating before. To start a business is hard. To start a social enterprise is hard. How's that been for you? What kind of barriers have you had to jump over or push through to work through, and how have you managed the emotions that come with those barriers?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think anyone who's been on this journey themselves would likely relate that it's bloody hard. And when you step into a project like Circle Group, and going, well, actually, we're going to create this vehicle, we're going to create an entity, we're going to create, a project that really, gets out there and does this stuff. At the start, you can feel completely enthusiastic about it. Energy is high, like many projects, right? Until you start going, holy shit, this is actually really hard. Well, actually, oh God, the runway is getting a little bit short, isn't it? Like we better get out there and land some projects. Yeah. And so it is hard. And over time, particularly at the start personally, I think that enthusiasm and passion fueled a ridiculous work ethic. And I say ridiculous because it was unhealthy. It was not standard 9 to 5 hours. It was very much, like, when do you stop? When can you? There's always more to do, right? And funnily enough, I think there's this pattern, where ultimately if you're not really sustaining that over time and you keep consistently hitting these barriers without that community around you, things can get tough quickly. And I do see that burnout is rife. It often happens or is identified at a stage when it's probably too late to rebuild energy, at least from what I've seen with a variety of founders. And coming back to my personal journey, I have 2 daughters, a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and my first daughter was 6 months old, and probably the whole Impact Boom journey started more or less at the time of her birth. So there wasn't just a business, there was learning to be a father, a father that I was proud to be, that someone that I really wanted to be present with my daughters for. But what I found was the growing of the business and the deep want to make that successful, to really support and sustain my family as well, really meant that it took a lot of energy away. And the balance from business and, let's say, business life work balance absolutely got out of whack. And I got very, very close to burnout. And what I learned really was the ability to say no and to choose projects was highly important. So to start to say no to things. And that meant, board positions or other sort of voluntary things that I calculated were taking up 2.5 days a week, out of, in theory, a 5-day week, was literally going and sitting on boards or doing other sort of things to help out, and going, gosh, this is why it's really being hard to do this. Yeah. But also closing the laptop and understanding that when you're with family and the kids, like, do you want to be present at home? Like, do you want to show up? Do you want to sustain the relationship with your loved one, with your partner? Should you have one? And it became a very deliberate decision to look at how this might be done in a more healthy way. And whilst we might have occasional deadlines that sort of somehow align and mean there's a week of 2 of intense work, ultimately now it's sort of got to this pace and place where knowing it's okay to shut the laptop, it's okay to have a weekend without sitting at work, that things can wait, right? That there is a lot of value in those precious moments of spending time with your kids or your partner, your family, seeing friends, doing those things which really energize and sustain you and are so important if you're trying to make a business, successful and see it actually create that change you want to see. So well-being and a focus on that and a consciousness and awareness of that is, I think, been really, really crucial for me.
Yeah. Okay. And so how else does well-being look? Do you try any other, do you exercise or meditate? I guess how else do you look after? So family's important. Do you have time for yourself separate to family as well?
Look, there's absolutely more that I could be doing to improve my exercise, right? I mean, like I love rock climbing, I love surfing, and I love like getting out in nature. And so, trying to integrate those sort of outdoor activities with the kids, and sort of get out and be active, I think is really important. Would I like to be surfing and climbing more often? Absolutely. Yes, I would. And I think as a business owner, as a father, as a partner, as a son and everything else, it's really about really trying to fit all those things in a healthy way.
Managing the priorities.
And managing them, right? So it's always a work in progress, but I do think having clear goals around that, even if they are sort of micro goals in working up to healthy routines and habits, are really, really important.
Okay, and that's an interesting one. So goals, I guess. How do you keep yourself accountable for what you're looking to achieve? Is that across personally and business wise? I'm curious to understand.
Like accountability is such a hugely important thing. There's actually a study on accountability, and I can't remember the name right now. I will as soon as this podcast finishes. But there was a study that was done, I'm sure you can Google it, which basically says when you set goals, if you clearly voice what that goal is, you put a deadline to it, you break it down and you share it with someone else who is going to hold you accountable, you can drastically improve, your success rate of achieving that. And so accountability, I think, one, to self, but also in that sort of buddy system is hugely important. And it's a huge element of what we do in our programs, our capacity building accelerator programs, etc., is really about pairing people up or having people pair themselves up to share those goals, typically on a fortnightly basis, to then hold each other accountable, have maybe some hand-holding or some bouncing of ideas on the way, or if that boundary's hit, having that person to help. But I think doing that's really important, not just in a short-term base, but like 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years. What does that look like? What is that vision? Where are you going? How are you going to sort of steer there? And we hear in the sector, we hear terms like mission drift. We hear people who start things who are, highly passionate about a specific area, and then they sort of drift away from that as they get lured into sort of funding opportunities until eventually they're sort of like, why am I over here? It's just sort of, no longer on that path, on that journey which I'd set out to create. So I think reminding yourself of what that looks like, and it's okay for that to change, as you gain experience, as you learn from your projects. But having a sense of what that looks like, I think, is really important.
Yeah, amazing. Okay. And so it's funny you say that. Actually, I was talking to Nick from Orange Sky just the other day, and he was saying that drift has, as he's gone through his journey, he's opened up into new rooms, and which has opened up new worlds and new possibilities to focus on impact. Have you found that there's been areas that you've been able to kind of enter into that you've seen that require more attention that you have actually pivoted into towards or made more change towards?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think a lot of what, like on my journey and the team's journey, it's really been about, it has absolutely been organic, and it sort of has been responsive to opportunities, again, that align with where we want to go. I mean, the fact that we're operating under this entity running these programs really came from sort of opportunities that have come along the way. But I think not necessarily tying yourself tightly to those things, like being flexible and responsive to those opportunities and fluid and adaptive is highly important.
Yeah.
I think that, the media stuff was almost an accident, right? Like one thing, just having the conversations, just let's record them. And to other opportunities that have come up have very much been a mix of being inspired by people or meeting the right person at the right time, and going, okay, yep, let's maybe sometimes quite stupidly commit to something which you have no idea how big it's going to get until suddenly like, I didn't expect it to be like this, but I'm in now. I've got to see it through. But like, I think a lot of what we do is just sort of evolved in this way. So
follow it naturally.
But yeah, like I think that there is value to having clear goals, absolutely. But there's also a lot of value to be had in being responsive and flexible and adaptive. Otherwise, like, why isn't this working for me? I've got this goal. People aren't, if we talk about lean startups or agile.
I was about to say agile, yeah.
This is about building, measuring and learning, right? So like, how do you consistently put stuff out, be really, sitting there with a mindset of what's working, what isn't working, and then adapting and changing and improving, right? So
constant
I think
iteration
that absolutely is important for any founder or business leader.
Amazing. And so I guess looking back over the past 10 years to where you sit now, I'm curious to understand the difference in Tom. How would you compare who you are now versus who you were as a result of the journey you've taken?
How would I compare? Look, I think there's the deeper purpose and why is pretty much the same, right? But the last 10 years, I'm trying to think where I was, pretty much that was 10 years almost to the day that I was landing back in Australia from being almost 10 years living overseas. And so I think the Tom that came back was still quite naive, and very much open to opportunity and open to opportunities that aligned with, that thing that felt right at the time. And I think, me 10 years ago still felt like I was trying, I was on that journey of experimenting and trying those things to see where I actually felt sort of right, like I'd found my place, and cliche word, tribe. And 10 years, moving 10 years on, I've got a hell of a lot more to learn, and am constantly learning, but I feel more, I suppose, at home within myself now. And I think a hugely important part for me has been travel. I spent a good chunk of my life traveling from the age of 18 and pretty much grew up my early adulthood years in a foreign environment. And so those experiences of, again, putting myself deeply outside of my comfort zone really helped, I think, accelerate my personal learning and, what did feel right or what didn't feel right. And so who knows what's coming next, right? Like it's just, again, I think.
But it sounds like you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, I am comfortable with it. Yeah. Like, would I love to do more travel? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Would I love to continue to go and learn about different cultures and different ways of doing things and languages? Absolutely. I think it's really about going, how might that be done as a father and a partner and running the business and having, I suppose, an idea of what that lifestyle might look like, and how you might make that happen. Is just finding again the ways that you can work towards to making that a reality.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think it's achievable
Absolutely.
as an impact leader, like as you know, which you are, what you've achieved?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
How
mean,
exciting is
people are doing it, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Now, as you know, the podcast is called Chasing Good, right? So,
Love the name.
thank you, sir. I'm passionate and curious about the concept of good. What does good mean to you?
It means different things for different people, right?
Yeah, absolutely, it does.
I mean, even if you look at political ideologies, like I do think people are intrinsically good. Like they want to be good.
Yeah.
They strive to be good. And when you are brought up in different circumstances, situations, different parts of the world, under different regimes, politics, experiences, intergenerational trauma, all of these different things that really shape a person and who they are influences what they believe to be good or not. And so what is good?
What is good to you?
Yeah, it's sort of me going, well, yeah, that's like, who am I to say sort of what is good, right? Because like, again, I have had all those influences come into my world, and I think I can be the judge of myself. It needs to sit right with me. And I think there's that, sort of refer to that sort of deeper feeling within, almost intuition of what feels right, and what feels comfortable. Like I think good is when you are ethically and morally aligned with what you are doing, what you are thinking, how you are acting consistently over time, and persistently as well, and not really straying from what that means for you, and trying to find ways to improve that and not sit still and go, well, that's it. This is what it means. Because there are so many times I can think where, without the awareness or consciousness or education, there was intent to do good, to create positive impact, but it was on occasions misguided until there was that mindset and that ability to go, actually, self-questioning, there's a better way to do this. Or actually the literature or the research actually says that this is actually not so good. Like, how do we continue to do that? So good, I think, comes from that alignment again with those morals and ethics, but also good should be an iterative process of that constant questioning to keep reflecting and ensuring that, as you learn, as we continue to evolve, as the environment continues to change, as wicked problems continue to just shift in different directions, that we continue to find ways to respond positively, to try our best to tackle them in a way that we genuinely believe is doing best. So it's a great question. I don't think I have the right answer, but just to maintain that mindset of constant questioning.
Well, I think you've summarized it perfectly. No one has the right answer, and we have to keep on working on it. And that's part of what we're trying to uncover in the podcast. And I guess on that point as well, you're looking at society. So there's the concept of good, and then there's the practical application of, as you say, everyone's good.
Everyone would like to be good. I think some of us know that, we can act in ways that are not good.
Yeah,
right?
That's fair. That's very fair.
Or that are led by ego or, selfishness or whatever else. But I think if we are behaving in that way, if we are authentic to ourselves, you can think of political leaders around the world who I'm sure actually go, it's probably a bit of a douche move to be doing this, but, my buddies will make billions of dollars out of it, or I will make billions of dollars out of it, or, get more power or whatever else. sometimes perhaps subconsciously or unconsciously. But I think if they really sit down and question themselves and do that, have that open mind, they will probably go, actually, yeah, it was a bit, it wasn't good,
Yeah.
but.
So
but
what do
I
you
gained a
think
lot.
society needs then?
What does society need?
It's a very broad question, I know, but just to be better, if there were 3 things that you think society could work on, or even just one.
I think it's a willingness and it's an intent to spend time purposefully collaborating, understanding, wrapping our heads around, ways to improve things, ways to innovate. And like innovation's become a buzzword, but I think finding ways to not sit still and not sit static and continually question. I think good is really about that constant quest of refinement and improvement. And what does society need? Probably just a willingness and openness from people globally to find ways to collaboratively work together on these really big problems that the world is facing.
How do you think we transfer from willingness to intent?
From willingness to intent, we spoke about, words and actions a little bit earlier. And where there is a will to do something, that is great, but it needs to be followed by action. And I mean, intent, intent is trying something, right?
I feel like intent is a step beyond willingness, though.
Yeah. I mean, we can go, okay, I'm willing to do that. Okay, now I intend to do that. But both of those things are still ultimately fluffy air, right? Until there is action that shows how that intention is actually going to play out. So it needs to be followed by firstly an understanding of what the problem looks like, and that goes beyond us just saying, well, this is what I think it is. Like, it's going out and actually speaking to people, doing primary and secondary research, defining what that is, and then going, okay, here's a process, and I refer to design. How might we now create actionable steps or a process around responding to that defined problem to do the work? So we've got, willingness, intent, action, results. How do we now understand what those results are and if they're working or not, and the impact that they are or aren't creating? And again, get into that iterative, flexible, adaptive learning process.
Amazing. Tom, mate, there's a lot of work to do, but with people like yourself pushing and trying to make the positive impact, I'm sure we're going to get there. So thank you for everything that you do.
Thanks to you, Michael.
Thank you for taking the time to chat with me today. It has been an absolute pleasure. I will put some details around how people can get in contact with you on the podcast as well. Thank you so much for listening, everybody.
Michael, really appreciate it. Keep up the great work with Circle Group. We love it.
Thanks, mate. Thanks so much for listening to Chasing Good, a Circle Group podcast. Our mission is to shift the world closer to kindness, sustainability, awareness, and action. We hope you enjoyed. Until next time.